This hotel has a restaurant built into it. So I know that a lot of people who are in quarantine have really bad food options, but ours is basically like 5-star hotel food. So while you do have the option to Uber Eats, some people had problems like getting the food to their room where there were too many orders or whatever. I'm not going to, because I've had like just amazing meals already, better than I would eat at home. I'm like, I'll just stay in the hotel. This is fine.
Yeah.
What's the you are totally required to stay in your room, right?
Correct. No window, no balcony, not even allowed to go into the hallway.
No window or balcony?
Well, I have the window, but it doesn't open. So yeah, no fresh air at all.
Well, okay. But I get that. But I thought you were saying that you're not allowed to take advantage of that. Like if you had a balcony, they would say no going out there.
No, if you had a balcony, you'd be allowed. And I have asthma right now, and perpetually every time I wake up, or every time I try to exercise, which happens half the time anyway. But I always get asthma in hotels, and they said if it's really bad, that they could move me to a hotel that has a balcony, because that would help. But I'm going to try to avoid it, because that is probably in a lot of cases used for people who have more serious conditions than me, or I brought enough medication that I should be fine.
What would happen if you just went rogue and just went wandering in the hallway?
It's a fine. I think it's $2,000. I think. You get fined even if you open the door without a mask on. So they deliver your food, they knock on the door, and then you have to wait 30 seconds, put a mask on, and grab whatever they left for you. And I also got delivery yesterday from my dad, sent some flowers, and my aunt sent some snacks. But all of that stuff is you have to be really careful about opening the door. And I'm always so conscious of how far I step out, other cameras, how. But nobody's allowed in this room ever either, except that today at some point I will get COVID tested. And they have to do that in the doorway. But you still have to put your mask on while you open the door. So it's all right. It's fine. I've got my Xbox Series S here because it's the light one. And I've got my Oculus here, which is how I'm exercising. My Razer laptop's got I think it's got a 3080 in it. Runs games just fine. So in the grand scheme of things, it's all right. But I am only on day 2. I
wonder if anybody has.
It'll get worse.
I wonder if anybody's opened any speakeasy hotels that enforce all these rules in the front side, and then the back side have secret doors that open and lead to an underground network of nightclubs and stuff.
Or I could pay people off to just let me walk up and down the hallway a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Would. Yeah, it's yeah.
I mean, it's pretty much guaranteed. Anytime there's something that's sort of severely legally enforced, there is invariably an incentive created to create the black market version of that thing. So I'm just thinking about what the pop-up hotels industry is looking like right now in Australia.
It's definitely some of the people that I got here with, because we're all on the same flight, really empty flight, were pissed off. There was one guy who kept being this is a fucking prison sentence. I haven't done anything wrong. Nobody said you did, buddy. It's okay. We're trying not to kill all the old people.
That's a weird thing that he would, as if it caught him by surprise and he didn't know fully in advance that this was
he was
waiting
the
for
protagonist of the universe, Austin. What you don't realize is this is his story.
Let's see how quickly Troy
it sounds a lot like we were talking about Troy there. I apologize. Troy, welcome to the call. Hey.
Are we talking about how President McComb, formerly Senator McComb, could have easily gone? Okay, so I'm tracking immediately. I didn't know what you're talking about. And then there's two things that you don't, or the one thing about physics that everybody understands. The same matter cannot occupy the same space at the same time. That is a law.
Exactly. Thank you, Troy. This is why we have you on the show. He keeps up, Austin, are you okay?
The same.
You look poorly. Why did you shave too? It's weird. Don't do that.
I have to liberate my skin periodically.
Yeah.
It's it's not good when
I want to put Austin in the front basket of a bicycle and ride him towards his people.
Wow.
You want to ride me towards my people? That's
an ET thing. It's
you say that in a bar and
nope. Instantly sounds. Alanah, I've already missed the whole thing about you being in a different place.
You have, and you missed out now. I'm jumping straight to the content that I never get to jump to, which is that I believe everyone has played Returnal.
Not me.
Oh yeah.
Fuck's sake, Austin. I'm trying to
I
have a
played
video
Miles
game
Morales
show out here.
first,
So look.
but after I played Miles Morales, I played Returnal.
I've been on the cutting edge by playing a game released in 2007.
Okay, so we've got Miles Morales. We've
Adorning
got
myself with its
Mass
swag.
Effect.
Do you think that they just looked at their launch window for Returnal and went, fuck? Or do you think they were like, we're fine?
in terms of what?
I think they probably benefit from the space. It feels like a really great place for a team like Housemarque. No, what came out? Resident Evil, but like...
Well, no, Resi's still hot, and then you also have Mass Effect.
Mass Effect's a different crowd, though, I think.
But it does
I think
interestingly
Is it not
have
competing
overlap
for the
with
same
both
space?
of those games. No, I think it's fine. I think it's fine.
I don't. Well, okay. This. I'm going to throw this. That you talk about.
I think
your
it depends
content.
if you're thinking of it as a small AAA or a big indie. I think it depends which angle you're coming at it
space.
from.
It's time. There is everything. I always pushed against this when people are like, "Our competition is this." I'm like, "Your competition is time. That's the only thing you're competing with." Mm-hmm. Because, and that means that like,
I don't know that that's accurate,
period.
though.
Why not? Because
Well, because
We're going to go
things,
philosophical the right way. I love
because
it.
there's marketing is very targeted and specific, and it's like if I as
it's
a player
throwing darts. It's throwing darts. Nobody knows. It's not a science.
Nobody knows. That's true. That's true. I would
And I
say
am a
though that there
scientist.
are. I would say though there are three. I would say Resident Evil, Mass Effect, remastered. Right, that's the name. Right?
Legendary
Is it remastered. It's a
edition.
remaster.
Legendary
isn't it?
edition,
Oh, Legendary
of course it
edition. Sorry.
it's been
Blood.
legendaryized.
Returnal. Those are three completely outside of people like us who work in games and therefore have to play everything. I think your average person on the street. Those are three very different audiences who are playing.
I
these
agree,
games,
and
right?
I also feel
would
like
say.
for those three games, because they are so different and so differently satisfying, I am jumping between the three of them for different reasons.
Sure, but you are an
And
anomaly.
Pokemon Snap.
Nobody
you.
plays. I mean, that in the best way. You are in every way an you're an
I am?
Alanomy.
A lot of
Did I just make a new word?
An Alanomy.
It's good.
It's very anonymous.
Most people, it's Alonymous too. It's Alanah adjacent. Most people don't have the ability to do that. Like, there's I think this is probably an accurate, at least estimate. You had a good day.
I've had a good. Well, it's my week off. You see, this is my only appointment thing
Get
to
it.
do this
Oh,
week.
I'm very
It's brilliant.
sorry.
I'm having a great
We're
week.
barely
It's
an
great.
appointment.
Oh, it feels like it sometimes. No, it's good. It's good. It's been a nice week. It's been a nice week.
Most people are hit gamers, right? So they're going to play. It's if for no other reason, it's either two things that the most precious commodity, either time or money. Most people now, Game Pass is probably going to change all that, but most people can only spend.
That's true.
60, 70 quid or whatever at a time. So they're like, what am I going to buy?
Quid. Why'd you go with his currency?
Because
of
I
all the-
love him more than I love you.
I see
This is
that.
waiting to see what I thought of his role in Miles. You were great in Miles Morales, by the way. As a little aside, genuinely loved that play from you. Genuinely,
man.
I thought it was nice.
I will
put a lot into that.
tangent off of myself. I cannot speak highly enough about the Insomniac team. Those guys,
best game feel people in the business.
dear
Absolutely
God,
incredible
man, they're just incredible. The way that they brought me into the team is super rare and very much appreciated. And they let me just own that role and own that space. I got to go in the whole leg day. Was a total ad lib, and normally people are like,
stuff. Is that I love that line. That's great.
I had
Well,
literally
good for you.
done a leg workout the day
Good for
before,
you.
like leg day, can't skip it. And they were like, "We're keeping that. Is that cool?" I'm like, "Is it cool? Can we keep it?"
The the cat in the backpack?
Yeah.
That cat is owned by somebody at Santa Monica Studio.
What?
So like he's posted a bunch of pictures
They
of
like
him.
captured or designed the. Oh, that's great.
So
know
they
that.
posted a bunch of pictures in we had an animals Slack, like a Pets of SMS Slack. I'm pretty sure his name's Kevin. And I'm like, I know that cat. He's famous.
That is the best name for. I want to call animals by like proper names. Like, this is Paul,
Charles. Yeah.
and this is Doug. No, even Charles is to me is a little bit too anthropomorphic or non-anthropomorphic, animalistic. Anyway,
You're like
I
Josh
was-
the cat or
Josh is
good.
great.
Josh is good.
Right now, I told Pam, I was like, I need you to understand, if we do get another dog, I really want to call him Toby Ziegler.
That's a specific kind of dog. It's a specific breed
has
you're going to
to
have to
be.
go for to get the Toby Ziegler
Has
kind
to be
of
just like
like a dash hound.
neurotic. Lovable, affable, but just
big dopey eyes.
Big dopey
the
eyes.
sadness, yeah.
Shout out to Richard Schiff. But I like when I bought Returnal, I was like, oh, here we go. It's $69.99. Or you can get the deluxe edition for $79.99. So like already, and we saw this a little bit for free.
I was back in dollars for those listening.
Yeah, there you go. I do the currency
consistency,
conversion.
please.
Sorry.
No, I think it's £70 here. I think it's a £70 game. I think it matches.
You think it's
Yeah.
Put a gun down, Mike. Why?
It's always the finger guns, right?
It is.
Like I'm a mysterious fella in terms of my politics and opinions. I love it.
Super pro gun.
You know what I mean?
Mr. Gun Guy, totally pro gun me. Yeah, no, very pro gun. Yeah.
So I think that we're starting to see with this new console generation, we're starting to see like it's scaling, right? And I feel like most people are like, dude, I don't have now. Pandemic people are like, I can go to work on Zoom, I can go to school on Zoom, and I can probably get away with, if I have a PS5 or even if I have a PS4, I could probably play more. And I think that we probably saw a huge uptick in not only installs but actual people playing and time in. But my install rate is like high and my play time is low. I'm here to support the industry as best I can.
Same.
It certainly supports me. I just
My
don't
Steam
give a shit
library has become a museum of releases.
Yeah,
It's
like
not
that
really.
too.
corridors that
My
you no
entire
longer
business
walk
model.
down.
I don't want to know the number of how many people have bought my games versus played them. Like, I think I've benefited greatly.
not playing
from
any of
exactly
that
the
shit.
phenomenon you're talking about.
Yo.
No, why would you?
I honestly, Mike, I am 100% install completion with your games.
That's very kind of you. I don't think you are probably
not.
the modal.
What is it?
average,
70%? Mike, you might know this, or Alanah, you might know this. What's
that?
the average completion rate?
If I know it, should I? keep
Yeah,
my
Austin,
mouth
you
shut?
don't know.
Shut the fuck
Not
up.
a good
Austin.
source
What
for
do you
this.
know?
Austin's feisty
You know what?
today. Have we called attention?
You don't
like,
have a
hoodie
beard.
Austin is feisty.
Yeah,
There's
it's
only
He's
one piece.
changed his role. I like
a
it.
re-
Only
Rebrand
one
and
person
it's
here with no
sassy.
beard that I'll listen to.
This
yeah.
is I'm
Sassy
it's-
Austin. That's
I'm
it.
in the legendary edition of Austin.
I will get to asking you about how you're
Paragon
liking Mass
Austin.
Effect.
That's all we're experiencing.
You had content
the other
you
one,
wanted to
Renegade.
do.
The last that I read, which was way out of date, completion rate for most video games was more like 30%. It's super low.
It is about a third, yeah.
But I think that now you can generally, like, you can see how many people have...
Story campaign completion, by the way, that not even like 100%.
That'd be
like,
way less common.
seeing the end credits.
Yeah,
seeing the end credits is 30%.
I generally look at like the trophies or achievements or whatever to see what percentage of people have gotten them, because that's also a really good indication of any secret achievements, which ones are next in the story or whatever. But it drops off hard. People do not finish video games, which I always wonder why. Like, I guess if you just don't like it, you run out of time. But for it to be that low and to spend that much money on it is pretty surprising to me every time. But
sometimes you get to a point though with games, I find, where you feel like you've seen everything it's going to give you, and whether or not that's true or not, you don't know. But like,
it's true.
I definitely check out games like sometimes early on, even if I'm enjoying it, just because.
Is it fatigue? Is that what it is, or is it just? I mean,
for me, it's the thing you were talking about earlier, where, and this is the unique position all four of us are in, where like, because I have to kind of play everything a little bit usually, just to kind of get a sense of where everything's at. If I feel like I've learned the lessons from a game, I'll move on. If I feel like I've seen what they're putting out, I'll complete games. Like, to be clear, like Spider-Man, brilliant game, but like you could definitely play the first half of Spider-Man and you would know most mechanics of what the game was going to be.
Yeah.
I enjoy that game, so I finish it. But like most of the time, when I get to that midpoint in a AAA game where I start to notice like this is where you're reusing that geometry I saw in the first level. Okay, that's usually my sign to check out and play something else. But that's again very specific position we're in as industry people.
I was told by someone whose anonymity I will protect, but developer in the AAA space, that they deliberately on a noteworthy title, or I shouldn't say deliberately, but knowingly, given finite resources and time to ship the game, they deliberately polished the first half of the game quite a bit more than the back half because of the phenomenon we're talking about. Is that common, you think? Is that I would imagine that's not anonymous to...
we can go deep. Like, I can talk to you about
developer.
Asset revelation schedules if you like.
I love that it's a thing.
We talk about the asset revelation scheduling. So this is literally a thing where if a game literally is like 10 things, 500 things, a million things you're going to put in front of the player, and you have X, each thing costs X amount of money, you 100% your asset revelation schedule will prioritize putting stuff at the front rather than at the end.
It makes sense.
So interesting.
Well, A, because of the phenomenon, but B, as well, because there's a really interesting phenomenon with people playing games. If you're playing a single-player campaign, about at the midpoint of most single-player campaigns, they'll stop giving you new stuff, because what they know is, actually, you're going to have new, interesting experiences past that point, because you're going to be finding interesting combinations of the mechanics they've given you so far, or they're going to be putting in levels like this character with this weapon that you've never had before. So they realize that the fun at that point is less about showing you new stuff than giving you interesting variation on what you've seen. And that's a thing you generally see in a lot of games. Obviously, lots of games break that rule. Mine do generally. I tend to be much more linear with my asset revelation, just because it's indie and there's lots of different expectations of a game from me that's 3 hours long rather than a 20-hour AAA. But yeah, it's a whole thing. Like you definitely map that out as a developer and consider that through.
It's interesting because that feels so. When I think about what the musical equivalent to that might be,
just drop the ball on the end of the song.
Or the end of the game. Like, I think of my mind immediately went straight to Final Fantasy VII Remake, because that was an interesting case where some of the music was, recorded big, grand, lush, full orchestra where they pulled out all the stops. And then there would be other cues in the game that are all fake and all synth orchestra, because it's like they just didn't have the resources, I guess, to do everything. So they had to pick their battles.
Very few studios have limitless resources, and most of them work at Sony.
But the thing that's
but even then, right? Even then, like everyone's got those limitations.
But the interesting dilemma about that is, for example, the big final boss, One Winged Angel, Sephiroth music. That's like one of the most iconic pieces from a score that is replete with iconic pieces. That you would not skimp on that, but it's your grand finale, which means that some vanishing, or maybe not vanishing, but some knowing subset of players will not get to that point, and yet it is so beloved. So it's an interesting
song. We don't do it with writing either. We're not like, well, they're not going to get to the end, so who cares?
But there have been.
We don't do that.
There have been. Look at the original BioShock that has like build up, and then 15-second ending cutscene. It is.
But that's
really,
because the true ending of that
even with writing,
game,
it's still a.
Sorry,
that's not right.
Population thing. with writing.
Talking over each other, making different sounds.
I'm going to win this. I'm going to win this. I'm sorry that I'm being very rude, but no. So asset revelation schedule is not about effort per asset. It's about the frequency of the assets you deliver. So you're still writing. You still want to write a good ending, but I guarantee in something like Spider-Man or any kind of insert Sony first-party single-player campaign here. Presumably, most of the writing for like barks and shoutouts, like "He's over there, reloading," those kind of the stuff you hear for seven. Thank you. I could do this. For
Wake
a living,
up,
seriously.
Greg Miller. You've got more competition.
The majority of the writing that is actually going to be in the game with you for the whole game will 100% be scheduled up so that you've heard most of those barks in the first half of the game. And you'll hear that when you play the game. Most games, when you play them, you're hearing I just played Miles Morales. Like, by the second half of that game, I've heard them yell the same things to you as a player quite a few times. There's still these bespoke moments, and that's what makes it excellent. But there's still, it's not about efforts, it's about where you really put that asset.
But I specifically mentioned polish being less.
Yeah, that's the thing that's tinging with me too. And Alanah brings up a very solid point. You can start reusing assets, but you can't reuse writing. There's a difference between writing dialogue and writing structure. You can't go, let's just recycle Act 2. No. So, I mean, you're writing...
Must have been the wind. Like, the bulk of video game writing is barks and
agreed.
The stuff that's said by characters.
And that's not a disparagement. That's just literally the text, right? It is all of this...
Just in terms of, like, scale,
yeah. The systemic dialogue. Like, if you look at something... What was it? I think it was Guinness Book of Records was Knights of the Old Republic, or Star Wars: The Old Republic. TOR was like the largest script ever, and David Cage just tried his best to beat that. But the thing that I don't understand is how do you the brilliance of being able to go, hey guys, we understand that these assets are going to fall into this part of our game. Therefore, we know that they're going to fall outside of that 30% completion rate. Therefore, spend less time on that is projecting so far. That's like someone going episode 23 is going to be of season 4. We're not going to have the same amount of budget for, so let's automatically make that an episode, or like a bottle episode. Now let's go shoot the pilot. That's bananas to me to be able to think about.
But that's what you've got to do managing a project. Like that's your job if you're putting together a project. Also,
who does that though? Who does that fall in? Who's under whose auspices?
On my scale, it's me at AAA. There's brilliant production managers who are meant to be handling that. And it's and crucially, I think the big thing here to remember is how iterative these processes are. So it's not the case. We're not talking here about like not bothering with something. We're talking about not iterating on it more than a couple of times.
So
everything's done
pins
once,
down on this,
and
everybody shift over to here because the winds have changed.
Exactly, it's prioritization. Okay. So you say, okay, we've got everything done. We've done everything is okay. Now where do we spend our time? I remember this coming up with Mass Effect Andromeda, because Mass Effect Andromeda, a lot of those facial animation issues that people had problems with were iteration issues. They were basically, this was said later by the team, Troy's just gone out of shot entirely. It was said later by the team that those, a lot of the facial animations that people didn't like, those were like the first pass, it's okay, it's good enough, but we have to come back and fix this. And then they just didn't have time and resources to go back and fix things.
It's funny because
that's how games are made, in that kind of repetitive, iterative. You get everything on the page, it's okay, and then you choose where you're going to spend more time bringing everything
There's
up.
a lot of the same boot in Resident Evil 8. That's all I'm saying. A lot of the same boot everywhere.
There's
a craft to that. There's a craft to knowing where you can do that,
put that boot,
and where you can't do that. And
there's a term
the
that
fact you mentioned the boot, the fact you noticed the boot indicates the boot was not the best thing. They probably should have made.
Is there a toilet in Resident Evil 8?
Let Austin speak. Yes, there is.
There's
Can
a
you
term
use it?
There's a term that always comes up that is always funny because it's such a specific acronym.
Anomalous.
That MVP. That always, minimum viable product is the term that is often brought up in very early planning conversations of like, what is the least we can ship this with if it comes down to it? If we find ourselves running behind, if we had a big thing that hijacked the schedule for 6 months and we lost polish time that we were banking on, like every project, at least that I've been on by and large, has had a buffer zone at the end, which is this amorphous grab bag period. It's almost like this contingency fund that you just are getting. The closer you get to that date, the less time there is in that, because you're eating that window as you get closer to it.
And if that goes negative, that's crunch usually. If that goes
theoretically
over,
speaking,
that's where it can go wrong.
Yeah, and so the idea being that. The idea being that, like, I am often tasked with the question of, what would be the MVP on the score? If we have this amount of music that we need to write, that we've budgeted this amount of, time frame on, but then we also have these production needs that we're trying to meet, like we need to go to London to record orchestra or whatever. Then the sort of finding where everything can click together and know what's the least I can guarantee you. Now, the nice thing is usually I'm basically left to my own devices to just sort of solve it. You can't really just
add another song in, can you? How would that work in terms of, like, where do you put it?
It depends on how well conceived the whole thing is, like, and how thoroughly mapped out it is. Because sometimes you make discoveries as you go, where you realize, like I'll make up an example it is truly made up, but it's plausible. Like, look at an Assassin's Creed type game. We mapped it out so that there was a lot of different logic behind the open world combat music, so that there would be minimal amounts of repetition as you just randomly got into fights on the street, separate from scripted missions and things like that. But let's say we hadn't done that, and there was just like a bank of combat music that was being randomly pulled, which is kind of or purely geographic, which is kind of the old school MMO or RPG, like here's the fight music for the forest, and here's the fight music for the castle, and here's the whatever. Let's say we had done it that way. Play testing the game as we're getting to, near the end, I've had analogous situations where I go, boy, I'm hearing, this one particular cue a lot. I really think we need more in that bucket because goddamn, I'm sick of it and I'm just playtesting the game and I wrote the fucking thing. Like imagine a player that's more into this game than I am.
Yeah.
So sometimes we are making late stage additions. Now it depends on the contract, not to drag this into that conversation, but especially on the AAA level, most contracts are worked out based on a essentially a rate or a fee per minute of music you deliver. So you can't just arbitrarily add more music. You have to discuss that because they are bound to pay you for it. And so, and I've tried, I hate that, for the record. I hate that approach. I don't like that as a contractual architecture, but it's also just it's just a fact of life that I've had to accept.
Yeah.
And part of the reason why I don't like it is for the exact reason we're talking about, like creative reasons. I'm playing the game and I'm going, the game is suffering because there's 90 minutes of music and it could really use even just another 10 minutes of music. What's the difference at 90 to 100? Like I can do it. And it's like, well, we don't have that budgeted. It's like,
do you feel though that for whatever reason, right or wrong, that music specifically is one of those line item things that kind of gets dropped down to be like, we can cut it or we can scale it back? Like, do you feel like it's considered more of a soft asset versus like we must meet a certain LOD on this, and so that's going to gain more money or require more resources? Do you feel like you kind of get skimped on? Not skimped, but
yeah, I get the spirit of what you're asking, and it depends what. There's no consistent answer to that because different studios are just all over the place.
It's the same with writing. Depends on the studio.
Is it?
Yeah.
But I think writing is more understood in general by the people making the spreadsheets to work out the budgets. Music is this amorphous.
Writing, but what's the difference? Most people can't tell that. I can't tell that was recorded at Abbey Road versus in the box.
Well, and also the added question of usually they'll just. My gut, I shouldn't make it sound like I'm offering an authoritative diagnosis on how the industry operates here because it's
Are you a scientist?
It's more of my it's more of my instinct. This is sort of my informed gut instinct that I have a suspicion that a lot of projects are budgeted where they, like let's say it's a massive AAA game. They'll have thrown, hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially into their music budget. And it'll just be, whereas the writing budget may be, here's how many lines, how many writers broken down to, side quests and main quests or whatever. Here's how many days in the studio that will translate to with actors. They may already have their mind figured out. They won't have a clue about any of the corollary. So music will just be one line on the spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Again, I'm assuming this. I'm not drawing this from
Totally
experience,
true.
but I suspect it's like, So then what happens is, okay, they come to a composer and the composer says, well, I want to charge you X dollars per minute. And if they really want that composer, then they basically just go and say, well, let's divide our budget by that amount and see how many minutes our score gets to be now. And so it's like that. Whereas, in a film, for example, it's obviously the parameters are wildly different, but you sit down in a film and you say, okay, well, the movie's 2 hours, which means at maximum we have 2 hours of score. There is no world in which we are delivering finished more than 2 hours of music. We might have considerably less. So it always is just, what's your fee to do this job? And whatever the final number is whatever it is. Now they have the luxury of very closed parameters compared to the openness of a lot of games, especially big, systemic, very, open world, that kind of thing, big AAA games. Mm-hmm. But the idea that the number would dictate how much score you get. And I speaking of Mass Effect, I think that that's an example where I would bet money that something along those lines is what happened, because that game, especially the first one, was very obviously really ambitious for its budget, because the game is reaching really hard in a lot of different ways, but it was, sci-fi RPG with this, it was doing the like
third-person cover
retro
shooter.
Yeah. Well, the action RPG thing was pretty novel in 2007. Like the idea of we're a full-on RPG with dialogue trees and all the kind of Dragon Age-y BioWare kind of stuff, but we're a full-on action game too.
Yeah.
Which
they clearly refined through the games. I mean, the action in Mass Effect 3 is actually quite good. In the first game, it's still pretty bad. I tend to, if I ever replay that first game, I play it on easy.
Yeah, I mean, that had the growth
no
pains,
judgment. No judgment.
But point being, they reuse score like crazy, and it always drove me nuts. Like, for example, there's one piece, this like kind of sentimental piano piece, whenever you open up one of the romance subplots, and it's just like you click the dialogue, you're being moody, you're like,
play some romance music.
You'll be in like your generic like Normandy, kind of Vangelis vibey stuff, and
then they press the romance button.
And then you'll be in dialogue, and when you clearly have the choice between.
Have you got a keyboard as well? Sorry, Austin. Have you got a keyboard as well?
No, I think
someone said romance.
Can we get some duets going?
It was a truck, but I don't know who it came from.
What did that truck?
I missed it entirely.
It was synced perfectly with your finger going down. That's why.
It wasn't me.
Romance. That's what I sound like. Let's make love.
Well, in any case, well, then it's perfectly scored to your way of living. That's for sure. Then I like picture you and Pam sitting and talking, and like in your mind is the dialogue wheel, and if you don't choose something, you'll both just stand there and stare indefinitely until you choose what to say.
Kind of like our wedding night. It was really
and
awkward.
She's just a little animation loop.
Who goes first? What happens now? Sorry, go ahead. I'll shut up.
But yeah, it did always drive me insane that you'll be in this moody thing, but then there's the very transparently obvious. If I choose this, Shepard is cracking open the seal on. There's the Caden romance thread, and the music just does this hard left turn into like full on romance.
Very good.
Oh, it's so
I
beautiful.
feel like The Sims does that, obviously, but in a way that's funny. And I think Resident Evil 8 actually does it in a way that anytime there isn't music in Resident Evil 8, I'm like, oh shit. And I started paying attention to it. There's a lot of aspects of the design of RE8 that I think are really interesting. But I started paying attention to when there's no sound to see if it happens every time. But they do make it pretty unpredictable. Sometimes there's no music and nothing bad is going to happen. And sometimes it's going to be terrifying in a way that is just so unsettling. It is Dead Space. That's true.
Dude, Dead Space did that the best. I feel like they were the bar setter.
Sure.
Whatever. For that. Like,
Yeah.
I still to that day can refer to that. And just like I brought it up, you're like, yep, exactly that. Ugh.
But Mass Effect has this really interesting thing with the music where I saw somebody tweet this the other day and I was like, you're absolutely right. Where the nostalgia that I have for Mass Effect 1 is very much tied to the music. So when I think of Mass Effect 1, I think of that map room music or the galaxy map music more than anything else. So even though
you want to know something crazy?
Sure.
That piece was verbatim the demo that Sam Hulick wrote for that game. I did a Game Maker notebook with Jack Wall, who was kind of the main composer of those scores, but he brought in Sam, and when Sam was asked to demo, the piece that he wrote is called Uncharted Worlds, and it was literally just his demo to get the gig. Is basically the most popular piece from the whole first game.
That happens a lot. Like that genuinely, like the demo track being specifically the menu music is something that, like, Thomas Was Alone, our menu music is Dave's demo. Our next game that I just got the demo from the composer that's going to be scoring it.
Next game?
It's going to be the next game. That's going to be the menu music, because it's just, there's something about, I don't know if it's just like that there's like a tentativeness.
I have a question. Is that because, you know what demo love is? I think everybody gets it, where specifically like with musicians, any time that, like, whenever when we were recording our album, whatever, I would be like, can you just burn me off a rough mix? I want to listen to that. They're like, nope. I was like, well, I want to listen to it. They said, no, because we don't want you to fall in love with it because it's not finished yet. Yeah. And the problem is that you'll get so attached, even though this isn't the finished product, and even though this is not perfect, and even though it's going to get better, you will hear the better version, and then it will, just like Alanah's talking about, where it's like you get this nostalgia that you see the lens through. You're like, well, where's that thing where it's not doing this? And you actually fall in love, because water seeks its own level, and we will find a way to adapt to it. So is it because that
happens all the time?
Is that the first? Is it the reason why you're like, put that in is because that's the first piece of music that you got, and you're like, throw this in the very first, or is it because?
That definitely doesn't apply in the case of Mass Effect, because that piece, like, it's not the menu. It's a
menu of sorts.
It's a menu, dude. Come on now.
Yeah, but fair enough. But I think it was
moving a cursor around. It's a menu.
Well, I should say it's not the home
not
screen.
the menu. I know what you mean.
No, it's on the home screen. That's true. That's
different
true.
piece.
I think it's more that, from my perspective at least, and to be clear, like, not the demo wouldn't be the one that goes in. Obviously, there'll be a better version of that. But I think I think it's also just the objectives of someone who's doing when a composer's doing you like when a composer's pitching, basically. I feel like, and Austin, you'll know this better than me, but what it feels like to me when I receive these demos is it's usually that they're trying to really get to kind of the essence, the most core thing they want to show me that they know the world that they're writing music for, and there's kind of that essential element to it, which then in a menu, for me, a good menu track should be doing the same thing. It should be the essence. It's the framing. It's the smell when you enter the theater. It's kind of the baseline you're going to be building.
But
so I think maybe it's the same objective.
Is that how often do they get
when
that?
You enter a theater. What do I even mean by that?
Huh? Like
What's
the overture?
Smell, like groups of people.
Oh, the smell.
I guess I meant overture, but I said smell, which is a really interesting.
We'll say popcorn.
Cognitive.
Didn't stand out to me.
We'll go with the very charitable.
It's like rooms full of people taking their coats off. It smells great. No, sorry, go on, Troy.
Is that how often do they?
I mean,
get
in fairness, you haven't smelled that in over a year, so
story.
you're probably mythologizing it.
I walked past someone in the street the other day, and I smelt like someone's BO for the first time. I almost cried. I was like, "This is amazing."
Food keeps getting me. The smell of food, even though I'm locked in a hotel for 14 days. But anytime
so close
I pass
to like
food,
just normal humans.
Do you feel? How often do they get that right? Where you're like,
what, BO? I mean, it can happen to everyone at some point. You know, we all have.
Where they go because that demo that they're doing, that's before they get the gig. That is essentially their audition, right? So it's I suppose it's not too dissimilar.
Well, if they get it right, they get the job. It's a survivor bias, right?
Is it? So are you saying like because they got the job, then you kind of come to them a little bit? If that was. Like, does it change your mind, or if you're like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna use you for example. Austin gives you his take of what on a new IP, right? So there is no established. You're not like I'm going for Star Trek, I'm not going for Star Wars, or I'm going for Mass Effect. It's like this is a brand new world, brand new thing. We're trying to be really cutting edge, and you just blindly send out a demo, and you go based on what I know about you and whatever intuitive things you're trying to pull from. You present something, and how often? What I'm really asking is, if you choose that person, do you then go, well, now my world looks a little bit like I'm seeing the world a little bit through their lens. Okay.
It's like an audition. Like if an actor walks in and does something you weren't expecting, I would never cast an actor. The one time I've done this, I've regretted it. I would
Troy
never
Baker.
cast. No, not Troy Baker. I've never cast an actor.
Greg Miller.
With an audition where they've done like an accent and then told them to do a different accent later in the process. When I've done
all the reason why that statement is true is because I didn't audition for John.
You didn't audition for me, no.
So that's the only reason why. Because I came in, I was like, maybe we should be talking like this. He's like, nope. I went, yeah, all right, cool.
That's true. But seriously, it's casting. It's good casting. Hiring people for a project is good casting. So you're looking for people who give you what you want, but then ideally as well, kind of give you something that's beyond what you want. So from my perspective, yeah, if I'm hiring someone to be, especially with a composer, because music is like probably my weakest area of expertise in terms
every
of
director feels that way, by the way. I hear that
cool.
on
That's cool,
basically 99% of projects. The first thing I'm told is, now bear in mind, I don't really know how to talk about music, or I don't know anything about music. And honestly, the really difficult jobs are the 1% where they're like, I know everything about music.
I know everything about music.
I love E flat, and can we use this instrument?
But I'm not hiring, and I think this is again is a perception issue kind of outside of our field, where I think people think you hire people just for the product of the work they do. So you hire Austin because you need music. Yes, that's true, but you also hire Austin because you need an expert on what the music should be. So you're also hiring smart people. No, Alanah's making a face like
never hire Austin.
Which is
why I asked him to do this podcast. Welcome, everybody.
But it's
a conciliatory
prize.
You're like, you can do the podcast in exchange for never, ever, ever having outside professional opportunities.
Yeah, I never want to be in the same room as you in a business context.
I can definitely speak to this whole subject.
That checks out.
right?
Yeah, it makes sense. You are
Quite
the expert,
elite.
I suppose. We would hire you for this subject. Yeah, that's...
So, because I've had it both ways. For example, on the Banner Saga, they were like, "You're here in the exact spirit that you just described, Mike." Anytime I said, "Now, what do you think?" I have this notion that combat could be done like that. That for those unaware, the game has a very like slow-paced, methodical, turn-based strategy sort of vibe to its combat. It's intentionally very deliberately paced and slow. And so, I pitched a similarly very slow kind of funeral dirge approach to the music, even though it's big Viking-inspired characters smashing each other with shields and hammers. I said, this should feel world weary. I think it should feel like they take no pleasure in this, and they have no bloodlust. This is a tragic battle every time because they just are tired. And I said, "What do you think?" And they go, "Well, if you're sold, like you are the head of your own department, so you have to convince yourself. So if you feel that that's the approach, obviously, if I did something if I came back and said I think it should all be
pop punk,
yeah, exactly. Like, I think it should be just pure K-pop. They'll be like, well, that's a little at odds with the rest of the vision of the game.
Well, let's hear it.
Like,
but let's hear it.
The thing is, they would hear it, and they would listen charitably through the lens of, like, is there something to this? Not from a defensive posture of, I'm pretty sure this isn't going to work, and like listening through that filter. But I've had other projects that are definitely not that vibe. They're like, we have a pretty specific idea of what we think this needs, and so can you deliver that? And demos or auditions fit anywhere in this spectrum, where sometimes it's, here's what we're looking for, and we want to know, can you do this? I'm in the middle of working on a demo. I wish I could talk about it right now because it'd be so illustrative of what we're talking about, where they said, and in fact they initially explicitly said, we don't think you are the right fit because we've never heard you do this kind of music. And I said, well, all the better reason to let me demo. Yeah, exactly.
Watch this shit.
Yeah, I said it's no commitment. It's no commitment. You don't have to. All you have to do is say no if you hit play and then 4 minutes later go, nah, not for me.
Not for nothing though. There is a inherent cost, not only a lot of times in your case with dollars, but also time. So it's like, hey, it's no skin off my teeth, for me to do this. I'm like, depends. I've seen you work, and you'll spend days, weeks coming up with a demo, an audition, and you'll employ a 60-piece orchestra and incur all of that cost. And then at the end of it, you're crossing your fingers going, well, hope this worked. And you can, maybe a couple of months or years.
Many times it's not.
You can do you have an album's worth of material that you can do. That's bananas to me. It's like, I don't know. I'll do an audition, throw it out. I was like, you auditioned for this, 2 months ago, and they want to give you dollars for it. I'm like, oh, okay.
No, I feel like some acting audition stuff seems pretty brutal to me, where they're like, hey, you got this morning. It's 10 pages. We need it by tomorrow. Thank you. And they often don't even get back to people.
It's never brutal.
But they're still making you do your work, which is a craft that you're an expert in, completely for free, often without even responding to you when you've submitted it. I still feel like acting auditions are pretty rough sometimes. I'm like, it seems
to me the worst part of acting auditions, which we have our own version of, but I think it's harder for actors, is the lack of, especially on AAA games, the lack of awareness of how these lines fit into anything, and the fact that you don't know, there's so often you don't know anything about the game at all. And it's one thing as a composer to be told, like, look, here's the broad brushstrokes of what we're after. My hope is always that the demo/audition reads as a conversation starter, and my ideal situation is where they hear it and they go, you don't have the burden of writing the definitive version of this theme, of this piece of our game right now. We want to know your thought process and how you're approaching it, so that it feels like down that road lies the answer. I had this, my agent the other day did a little thought exercise on Facebook where he asked a bunch of composers, what's the best quote you've ever gotten from somebody that worked with you? And so everybody was my favorite was Hans Zimmer responded and said, this is better than sex, was some director quote. He wouldn't say what director told him that, but
some of his work,
I'm going to go Nolan, but my response was in response to an audition for a job that I got, where the director said, this is it was for a movie, and they sent me a scene, and I said, can I watch the whole movie and then I'll do the scene? It was basically the opening scene. So I watched the whole movie, loved the movie. Then I wrote this and I'm really glad I did, because where the movie ends up has this plot twist that I thought, ooh, I can foreshadow that in the score. And if I'd watched the opening in isolation, I would have had no idea. So I did this whole pitch around, here's the weird subversive way that I'm going to foreshadow the ending in a way that you'll never track, but then pays off. And I wrote this elaborate thing. I hired musicians and singers and all kinds of stuff. And I remember I said to the director, and he goes, this is completely wrong for the scene, but only someone crazy enough to try this should be working on this film. So you're hired. And I was like, I'm putting that on my business card, man. That's the best quote I ever got.
That's a bold director. I don't like what you did, but I like that you did it is a very bold play to make. I love that.
But I'm going to quote you, Austin, and this is one of my favorite quotes, and I've totally stolen it and applied to my conversations in the way that I do my business, which is, I'm not selling the end product. What I am selling is the process by which together we will get there. Like, what I want to do is, I don't hope that I walk in the door and get it right. Now, most directors don't want to hear that, because what they want, the shortcut, I know. But the thing is, if I walk in and I go, I know inherently who this character is. I know them inside and out. There's nobody that can play this role than I. A director may appreciate that passion and that fervor, but how can I know inside and out who this character is off of one scene, maybe two? Sure. If I walk in,
it's also selfish. Sorry,
it is. It's 100% selfish, and what I want to do is.
No, I mean it's selfish on my part. Because if I was content to, be like, let's say that after Journey came out, all I ever wanted to do was continue writing music that sounded exactly like Journey.
Right.
It would be pretty easy from that point, because then it's like, oh, if we want that, we just bring him in, we turn him loose. We don't have to have a meeting. We don't have to have a conversation. Just have him do that again. And if that was satisfying to me, great. Life's kind of on autopilot at that point, and I can do my music and then do other things with my life. But because my interest is so specifically in getting to the end of a project and saying, my little catchphrase is, when we ship the last cue over the line, I want to look back and go, I didn't know that I knew how to do any of this.
Yeah, dude.
And so what that requires, though, is the director buying in on the fact that this will be a process, because I myself don't even know where we're going to end up, ideally. But that's an X factor that's not appealing.
I want to be scared the entire time, but I want to do it without fear. I want to be scared the entire time, going, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can do this. But be able to be fearless in that. That to me is, to be able to have that kind of perspective on the other side of it.
And not every project, to Mike's point, I think if I can paraphrase you, for some directors, or maybe not in general, but like within specific departments, like maybe you love this thing that we're describing with actors because you've got a soft spot for that process, or you resonate with it, you understand it, you feel like you're an effective director in that space. But when it comes to music, I mean, on John Wick, you were not really micromanagey at all. It was basically like, once we kind of had the vibe figured out.
I remember it took us a little while to get to what we wanted to do. I remember lots of back and forth between us on that. But then, once we had, this is what we're doing, go for it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, which seemed like that's your happy place, right? Like I'm like happy
a lot
to
of
set it loose.
Exploration early, and then I like things to like go in a very logical way after that, because that just makes it easier to schedule and make sure that things hit their marks, from a production point of view. We don't have to make the last half of the game shit in order to fund the first half of the game.
Right.
To bring us full circle,
right.
Which is always the trade-off. Returnal's great, by the way. We didn't talk about it.
That is what I tried to lead into here.
Yeah.
Let me intro the show real quick. Hey, everyone. Welcome to Play, Watch, Listen. I'm Alanah Pearce. I'm a video game writer. That's Austin Wintory. He's a video game composer. That's Max Walker. Mm-hmm. He's a video game actor. And that is Mike Bithell. He's a video game director.
I didn't even catch the Max Walker thing.
Yeah, there you go. I'm going to start with Austin. Please be short. Austin, how are you liking Mass Effect?
It's easy to be short. I've barely had a chance to play it, to be honest. I've been so slammed. So
perfect. Great.
Yeah. I mean, I've always loved it. I threw on some support swag for this. I'm actually boiling because I don't normally wear things that don't have a zipper in the front.
It off.
So I'm literally exploding right
just
now,
for the brand.
Take it off.
I played a little bit of it.
It's got a really narrow neck. It's going to be a whole process to get this thing off.
I played a little bit of the Mass Effect Trilogy remaster, Legendary Edition, or whatever. And yeah, I'm like, cool, it's Mass Effect. That's chill. Like, I'm happy that it exists. That's my take. But Returnal,
I was expecting some more. I'll just add. I'm being brief. For me, this is brief. I saw your gym look. The thing, there's some quality of life changes that they made in the second and third that were really basic that I thought that they would just go ahead and do in the first one. I thought was part of the point. For example, when you are going around different solar systems and scanning for resources and stuff, can't remember if it was in 2 or it was only in 3. They put a little percentage complete thing for you to know, like, I've explored everywhere. And Mass Effect 1 does not do that. And it's just up to you to remember or to revisit old locations.
Yeah.
And that's especially annoying when you clear out a whole solar system, and then later you unlock a quest that adds a location there. You have to kind of know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And that's like a little quality of life thing that all they have to do is just add a little percentage. Argus Row, 89%.
Yeah.
I thought that they were going to do more stuff like that to kind of retcon the first one to be more like the second and third.
Doesn't
but they really
feel like
just
they
kind of
changed anything
up-resed
at all. Yeah, which...
Yeah.
I was going to do a Star Trek deep cut, and I was going to be like scanning for life forms. I love scanning for life forms.
Forms. Do.
That's not even from the show. That's a Generations cut.
Life forms.
Which is a movie I think is woefully underappreciated.
Data.
What? So much is
Get a hold of
happening right
yourself.
now. I'm overwhelmed and afraid.
Amanda. Data.
Returnal. The way your hand moved.
Which is ironic given that he's doing Picard right now.
I have to go.
He's evolved the character.
I came in late and I'm leaving
I have to
early.
go also. You have to tell me what you think of Returnal before I let you leave. I will lock you into this call.
That opening cutscene is dope.
It's really good. All right.
Okay.
Well, that's
as
our
far as I've
Returnal
gotten.
episode that I've been looking forward to for 3 weeks.
That's fine. I will say this. I'm
done
making a
it?
proclamation. I'm not going to return. I'm not going to Last Jedi this. I'm going to not Jedi. Fallen Order this. I'm gonna. I'm not Last Jedi. This
it's exquisite. It's a really great game.
I'm gonna play through it.
I'm
excited.
Rules. I love the rain effects. I think the way
I
they
love
do
the
math
save
on
system.
I love the fact that
I kind
they
of want to
go.
bully them into putting a save system in.
Hey guys,
I know the House Smart guys. I want to bully them into getting the save system done.
The very beginning, you're like, you want to set your display. You want to do all this stuff. Can you see all this? Is barely visible. This game is hard. It's supposed to be hard. It's like, ooh, that's not a good sign.
It is pretty hard.
How do I? All right.
Maybe we'll revisit it next week. I was really hoping this would be
It's a really good game.
Returnal Watch Listen. Here we are. Just didn't work out. I don't know what I expected.
I will endeavor to play it by
You should. I think it's fantastic. I'm a big fan. But I also really do love Resident Evil and can talk about that forever, but I don't know if any of you have played it. So, all right.
Nope.
Cool.
Country chicken.
Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next week. Bye.